over time is really interesting. How many times you actually, when you're sitting writing, how many times you actually get up and make a cup of tea? Sometimes it's many more than many unconscious activities. But specifically, my interest has always been in how do we reinvent how we work to make it delightful and wondrous, and hence the tree office and other places. Did I show you the ex-airport with the heads down display? Let me show you some concrete examples of this. But this is, who's in charge of how you work? I mean, in your classes or your X classes, you are given assignments to do, but where and how you do them, when you do them, who's in charge of that? Exactly. So you have creative agency on how you work. Have you exercised that creative agency? I mean, I know in high school you might have had a fight with your parents. Why don't you sit at your desk? Why do you work in bed? I don't know, people have these kind of silly ways, but this is actually an assertion of what is comfortable for you, right? Who's the best judge of that? So how many of you work in your dorm rooms or in conventional ways?
Yeah.
Yeah? You sit at a desk, you prefer to sit at a desk, and you have a desk that you like to work at, as opposed to cafes and...
Yeah, I usually like more solitude.
Sorry?
I usually like more solitude.
You like actual physical solitude?
Yeah.
In a dorm room or in your own bedroom or in...
Wherever I usually can't, prefer not to work in public, I think.
You don't like working in public?
Yeah, I think I prefer. I'm not opposed to it, I prefer.
Who works much better in public? In cafes, you concentrate more.
No,
you can't. It's very,
very different. Sometimes. If I'm on Wi-Fi, go to this garden. It's on Howson and Bowery. So
the Christie Garden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
original community garden.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell a little story about that garden?
I don't know. No.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably the most important garden in New York City. The Christie Garden was in that area. It was in the 70s. A conceptual artist and performer was living in a little rundown single occupancy thing where the Bowery was not always where the new museum has been. It's been a place for the down and out, and hence it was occupied by artists. There's some public housing projects, and that lot was empty. And Christie saw an old fridge and a little kid crawl into the old fridge and rescued the kid from the fridge and took her home to the, this issue of children being suffocated in old refrigerators, and now you have to actually remove the refrigerator door, so that doesn't happen. And that was in the early 70s, I believe. Look up the history of the Christie Garden. And she did exactly what we've been talking about. She personally got 3 or 4 people and cleaned up the garden and started the first community garden in New York City. Not because anyone asked her to, not because there was any organizations, but because, what does it say here? The Liz Christie Garden. Yeah. Oh, she died. And this was the beginning of the Green Guerrillas as well. The Green Guerrillas are an organization that is formed in order to do, again, the things that you're interested in doing. greening our shared urban space. So to here. What's the most creative way that you guys have worked in your own spaces? If we go back to this, that Christie Garden, you go down there because there's no Wi-Fi, to get away from Wi-Fi?
There's no Wi-Fi. Like, I don't need Wi-Fi. Because I don't like, whenever there's Wi-Fi, I don't really work in my room or in the library. And the other places have like internet connection, I'm like cafes and all that. And I don't like it that much. So when I'm in Wi-Fi, I just go there because it's, I mean, there's people, everyone's like in their own space. It's a free environment. There's a lot of trees and all that. So just like, it's like this, like,
Your secret, what's other creative ways that, what ways do you feel like you've exercised your creative agency in your workspace to make you feel more productive, comfortable, inspired?
I have to work always in the same place in my case, for example.
Do you? Interesting.
Mm.
And the reverse. What about you? Anybody work in the law school library?
not in the library, but there's
The courtyard?
no. There's a building for like law school classes. It's on Thompson Street, I think.
Yeah.
You go to the second floor lounge.
I see. Yeah, who works in the lounges? The NYU in the last 5 years has put in like 3 lounges. Bottom of the Gallatin building, philosophy department, that are street front lounges. Does that seem appealing to you to work there? Just to sit there and type and watch passers-by? Could be a display.
There's also a lounge. The thing is, at the law school, sometimes the security guard won't let you go in because you're not a law student.
How does that make you feel?
I don't know. It's just,
Angry?
it makes no sense because if nobody's using it, might as well like me use it. And there's also a lounge on 19 West Court at the politics department on the 4th floor. It says it's only for faculty, but I always go
Where is it?
on the 4th floor of the politics department. So
Where's politics?
19 West Court.
How did you find all these places? You
Yes.
should have a little study guide. You should do a little map of great places to work.
I went yesterday to see my advisor, and there was a lounge outside, so I just stay there. And it's super nice because there's like a huge window, and there's only like 3.
Yeah, the Puck building also has a few little tucked-in areas if anyone is taking any sociology classes. But these are places where people are said to work, right? Except for this place that you've discovered. What about you? I mean, in terms of.
I've worked in Washington Square Park before, just sitting on a bench on my computer and writing. And then cafes too, but I stopped because you always feel like you have to buy something.
And then you spend up too much money. But it's cheap office space, it's cheap rent, right? Has anybody used Breather? You need a whiteboard, a place to have a meeting. Suddenly you go work with some people, or it actually started interestingly as a place where you could just rent a couch for an hour or 2.
Mm.
So, in kind of the Airbnb version of a workspace where you can work. But it's become much more formalized as kind of ad hoc meeting spaces. Again, for the, the efficient allocation of the, 2 minutes. 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 2 min
It's like Airbnb.
Yeah, it looks pretty simple.
Pardon me? Yeah. Cool. And they're great. There's one on the corner of LaGuardia and West 3rd, just above the stationery store there. There's a few rooms there that are really nice little rooms for whiteboard. You want to go there and plan a shoot. You need a whiteboard. You've got a couple of people. Cafes kind of just don't cut it in a lot of ways. But this is, huge new startup, sold for I don't know how much. But it's about reinventing work and where we work and how we work. I mean, this is the zeitgeist of your time. BuzzFeed. Anybody use BuzzFeed? Give me your critique of BuzzFeed. Is it your news service? Is it your front page New York Times? It's not.
It's pretty clickbait heavy.
It's pretty what?
Clickbait.
Clickbait heavy, and that annoys you, or that just really?
Yeah.
I thought that sucks you in, or
Yeah.
it's because it sucks you in that you can't.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point. Kind of like gets you it's like stuck into like a matrix of articles that of like lists basically.
Yeah, so I thought that might be a great way to do
It's 10 o'clock.
survey. To use some, instead of having a boring petition where fine, they do their purpose, but maybe it's, do you know what a dragonfly heart looks like? How similar it is to yours, right? Or, one of those little catch things. Here's a climbing wall that you can try, whatever that, that we can actually do hooks and try and get the clickbait generation baited into, doesn't have to be done, does it? I mean, the strategies that they use, actually run by a dear friend of mine, Jonah Peretti, like I mentioned, who comes out of exactly the same world as I do, well-trained. And I told you about his Nike, his thesis project was for Nike. So this is not Trump, right? This is, the viral media of the time. And do you know what BuzzFeed is, the influence it's having in the world on conventional advertisers, on traditional media?
I mean, there's a lot of like sponsored articles.
Yeah,
Like,
so what are they doing? They're redefining advertising, right?
Yeah. They'll like write an article and you'll click it and like you'll read it. But then if you look at the masthead, it'll be like sponsored by like Orange is the New Black. It'll be an article about like prison system or something. You'll be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so
So they like bury it within information and like the actual article.
it's horrible to the conventional idea that there is objective journalism and then there's a little area that we self-advertising, and that's what supports good journalism, right? And never the two shall intermix. BuzzFeed is challenging that. And they have the best coverage of the Syrian refugee crisis. They have the only international journalist sitting in there, so embedded, right? Reuters doesn't have them, they can't afford them, right? I think it's really worth watching. This is your generation's media radically redefining what advertising is. Does advertising have to be stupid and manipulative? Can it be intelligent? Is there a black and white division between giving advertisers space to write intelligently and whatever they like to reform? Vogue magazine, right, is an example. Have you ever looked at a Vogue magazine? They are huge and influential, right? And what's the ratio of journalism to advertising? Very small. Even Rolling Stone magazine is a ratio of journalism to advertising. If we look at that as the rate, it's less than 50-50. But Vogue magazine, as an historic example, is a magazine that's worth looking at because of the advertising, right? All of the production value of the imagery and the, you know, it's mainly done by the advertisers. So good, pure, objective journalists and bad, manipulative corporations, not something we can sustain anymore. Have to figure out how to do it differently. And BuzzFeed is. Maybe we have to figure out how to work with the kind of BuzzFeed model. But the kind of click-throughs you get, imagine if I was doing a research project on the Syrian thing and had structured the participatory research, like having people, can you identify this plane, right, on a BuzzFeed kind of thing. Is this a, you know, in a little, you know, BuzzFeed quiz things. I mean, I think they're extraordinarily how sucky they are, right? How much they suck you in. All that. I mean, actually, here's the thing. Give us a favorite of one of the things that have sucked you in, and analyze why and how we could reproduce that for this project that we're doing, our collective public experiment and your individual experiment. How could you use something that's worked on you almost against your will, you know, some survey of, I don't know, really dumb things, how to know that you are a creative genius or something, whatever, what are they, how do you know that you want to live in New York City, right? Some survey that might have kind of a nice hook. So can you do that for me? Can we take a few minutes and do you know what I'm trying to ask you? To get a viral media strategy and apply it to your how stuff is made assignment. Am I not being clear? Let me just show you a couple of things first. I pulled up the X Airport to try and push you to think about the creative agency you have over how you work, right? How you sit. I have a series of these, you know, hairdressers have those saddle chairs that they wheel around on. I have a few of those, and I've been thoroughly trading them to friends because they're so nice to sit on, because you're sitting upright and you're active, and it's much better than the terrible. I can also, does anybody do yoga poses while they're sitting? Do cross-leg? No? That's what the Yoga Project is about. It's about how to hold yin yoga poses as you're stretching out your hips and releasing. Why not? Actually, this is a project I did a number of years ago called X Airport, which was about how many of you love to fly? How many of you find flying so exciting? You do? Yes? Do you remember when, as a kid, we did? Or is it now you just... I mean, mostly flying is, God, how long will it take to get to the airport? And how long will it take to get through the security? And do I really have to take my shoes off? And okay, you know, this kind of, flying has been made uninteresting, right? Somehow it's been made terribly boring. And yet, it's flying, right? It's flying. Why isn't flying exciting? So the X Airport was a series of projects to really see if we could engage them under a flight, and it was triggered on the basis of a the FAA. Did I show you this? Trying to figure out a way, and our class cost, we can get one of these. about this is about 5 years ago when I did this project. Look up the icon A5, you guys. Oh, look, here's exactly the same point I was making. The idea is to bring the fun back into flying.
Looks like a toy. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's your new toy?
I said it looks like a toy.
It does look like a toy. It looks like a
Little robot.
yeah. So the Icon A5 was designed actually by some friends of mine that I went through school with. One of two plane companies, and this was the plane companies were started because the FAA had created a new class of aircraft called the Sport Pilot, and the Sport Pilot license. So it meant that you can see here, sport flying is daytime flying, not instrument rating. It's 20 hours to get your license, as opposed to 200 hours.
Yeah, that's
20 hours.
20 hours
That's
This?
to get
but
your
this was
license.
mildly dangerous, but
That's nothing. That's,
Well, this is the interesting thing. It's a game changer, right? To get from 200 hours, and it would cost you.
Yeah.
I know I tried to get my pilot license, and it was going to cost me
it's a lot
way
of
back
money.
then, $80,000. Now it's like $150,000 once you get, all your hours and training and certification. I don't have that, but this costs about between $5,000 and $10,000, right?
for the training.
To get the sport pilot license in 20 hours, right? Not very much. So the interesting thing is it redefines who changes the barrier to entry, right? So in this country, we give kids, right when they're the most irresponsible, we give them a driver's license, right? At 16, is that right? 16, you get your driver's
Even
license.
15, right? Or
It's you get the
In
some
permit at
states.
15 years.
Yeah.
you can drive with your father or with your mother.
Yeah. In more civilized places of the world, you have to wait till you're at least 18.
In Spain, we have to wait till 19.
18 years.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be better if they swapped the drinking age and the driving age?
That would.
Yeah,
That
Yeah,
means
that's
then you
very
drink first and then you start driving.
Yeah, but at least you get your kind of binge drinking out before you're driving around this, 600-pound, 1,200-pound deadly weapon, right?
In Italy, you can actually drink, well, not anymore, they changed the drinking age to 18, but before you could drink at any age and you could start driving at 14. It just has to be a lower CC.
You know what's the biggest
The mini cars,
yeah.
biggest cause of infant mortality in this country?
Car crashes.
Mhm.
Really?
Car crashes.
No way.
Yeah. Do you know what is bigger than teenage suicide or mental health issues? Car crashes.
Really?
Are they the same thing? Who knows? There's a lot of argument. But what was the figure that the roadkill, the human kill on roads from our young was more than 3 times what is sacrificed in both the world wars. Anyway, this idea that there's a huge carnage somehow tolerated, right? Whereas that kind of carnage is seen as a tragedy in the context of war. So here we have a radical alternative, right? What if, and now you can, at 18 or 16, get a plane license? The FAA decided that they would make that possible in order to make general aviation more safe. That's what I'm giving my son. He's just 16. He thinks, oh, boring. because that's what kids think of parents. But yeah, he's got put a down payment on these. These cost about a little bit less than a Tesla.
What?
the plane. It's about 110.
You're getting your own?
120,000. What?
You said you're getting your own?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm recommending that you all tell your parents, you know how much you're spending on the on our education. Could you just put that into a plan?
You're gonna get one?
Yeah, I'm signed up for one. And in fact, I
But this kind of is without power or something like this.
no. It's what it is a standard reciprocating motor, right? The safest motor known, right? The FAA made this class of aircraft in order to make general aviation safe. General aviation is what we call all the small planes. And, you know, that's a very unsafe area compared to commercial aviation, right? So the FAA creating this new class said, okay, let's make a class where we can regulate it very well, and we can say there's these very safe planes. So these planes, the major cause of a plane crash is when they stall and inexperienced pilots, they fall out of the sky, right? In the case of these, they can't stall, or if they do stall, they have a, if you will, something like an airbag, which is a ballistic parachute. So if you go into stall, it shoots out a parachute and just ding, 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 come down. So what if we all, if you all got this as your graduation present, right? What if we all flew around? How would that change? How would that change the world? How would that change your life? Would you go fly home for the weekend if it was an hour flight?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if I had a plane. Yeah.
Right?
If I had a plane, yeah. I'd
Yeah.
fly a lot
To be
more.
free gas though.
Yeah,
That is so expensive.
No, it's like a diesel truck, right? Same reciprocating
How
motor.
far can you get?
Well, it's a non-night instrument rating, so you have to do it, fly during the day, and it's only a two-seater, and it has this ballistic parachute. But what you can see the aggregated effect of that is to change the relationship between the urban and the rural. Now, why do you think it's a water landing plane?
So you can,
Yeah.
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 And how much is it to build the wet landing? They're here, right? That little wet landing we call the Hudson, right? Remember the flight? What was the flight that landed in the Hudson called? Anyway, Flight 303 or something. Can you look up the flight that landed in the Hudson River? That was a little promo, I think, for this idea that we can reimagine rural-urban relationships, right? It means you could commute in from rural Pennsylvania, from a little lake there to the East River here, fly in. And so what about, your first response is, oh my God, that's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's actually harder to run into someone in 3D space than it is in 2D space, right? Remember with this roadkill that we've accepted as it's safer to fly. There's a whole lot of counterintuitive ideas. I've told you that it's counterintuitive to me that in Toronto and New York, the places that I've looked at carefully, the major traffic fatalities, pedestrians, bicyclists, motorbikers, sports cars, public transportation. Who gets killed the most in an urban environment? Can you guess? I always thought it was motorbikers, right? That's what my mother said, you're not getting a motorbike, you're not getting a motorbike. And most people, I did get a motorbike. Now my son is saying he wants to get a motorbike, and I'm saying, can't you get a plane instead? What do you think? Car accidents? Bicyclists? What's the most deadly?
Bicycles.
Bicycles, yeah.
It's a bicyclists.
Pedestrian.
Pedestrians. 60% of all traffic fatalities in New York and Toronto. Pedestrians. So our intuitions about how, what is safe, okay, not often, not always correct, and worth revisiting. Certainly, come on, this looks fun. I got one of these.
Where can you keep it though? Where are you gonna keep it?
Where's the infrastructure? We've got all this water. It's just sitting there, right? We can get beyond the bike path along the thing and can just tie it up there, right? On the old pier. We can build some nice new piers, right? We've got,
No one's gonna steal it.
Yeah, it's like a boat.
So this idea, of course, this is the guys that did it. Steen Strand is the chief designer. He's a great guy, but the CEO is a former military pilot, and of course, he knows the market. It's a leisure device for wealthy men, which is who have the most disposable income and spend it on what you call toys for boys, right? That's what it was marketed for. Not as, how could we really reimagine urban-rural relationships in such a way that they're delightful. Actually, there's one, I know this is I get these quotes sent to me from I got an interesting quote this morning. I just want to read it because it's these self-help quotes. What's everyone's favorite self-help quote? Imagination is more important than knowledge. Einstein's overquoted. The one I got today was, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people that have come alive. That was by Reverend Howard Thurman. That's a good thesis, I think. Articulates many of the ideas that we've been talking about. How is it nice to work? How is it nice to move around? What delights us? And if we design for our own delight and wonder and trust our own sense of what is good and right, we're probably going to do a better job than the kind of technocratic approach of, I'm going to design for you what I think is rational and optimal. And so we have departments of transportation making decisions about our green spaces that make no sense in terms of fostering human health, biodiversity, or the kind of delightful urban convivial common space that we'd like to share. So let me just show you again these. So this ex-airport was, okay, so what if we had, what if we used this opportunity of these light sport aircraft to create wet landings in the new black? Of course, we have the embedded infrastructure, particularly around the verdant northeast, where sprinkled with little lakes and, but what if you really optimize the idea of turning parking lots into wetlands? Because wetlands, right, are an important technology of the 21st century. They're biodiversity hotspots. They sequester a whole amount of carbon. They address the amphibian crisis. They water treatment facilities, distributed local water treatment facilities instead of big chemical plants. We can do water treatment locally, and now, in fact, code has required that any building over 20,000 square feet has to do all its own water treatment in situ on site through these living cells, right? Wetlands are the technology of the 21st century, right? And for the last 200 years, what have we been doing with wetlands? the wetlands around the Pearl River Delta. Have you seen what's happened to them in the last 20 years?
Shouldn't.
Filled, developed, gone. California has lost 98% of its wetlands. Around the Northeast, we have regulations, state, federal, all sorts of regulations to protect wetlands because they're so important, right? But what happens? We're still losing them. Why? The swamps. What's happened with Superstorm Sandy and the building on the lowlands? What happens with more? What happened in New Orleans? What did they do to the swamps?
Damn them.
So New Orleans, 8th Ward, many of the areas are below sea level. Right? Interestingly, they don't even have a swimming. Many of the people who live in those areas can't swim. So any catastrophic failure would be catastrophic indeed. So the question is, we need wetlands. We have to retrieve them from the swamps of the cultural imagination where they've been thought of as dirty, useless land that gets built on last, that all the industrial, all the industrial facilities get built on, or are developed, filled and developed, right? Even in it's actually an interesting, well, there's a whole lot of stuff I can talk to you about wetlands, but how do we incentivize wetlands, given that they're so incredibly useful to us? How do we make them more delightful? I would say we work in them, right? We work in the swamps. And this is really important to think about with the Zika virus. You've heard about the Zika virus. What causes the Zika virus? Mosquitoes. Where do mosquitoes breed?
Standing water.
Standing water. Great mistake was made that they breed in swamps. So they drained the swamps. Still had mosquitoes. In fact, they have more mosquitoes when you drain the swamps. A healthy swampland, what happens to mosquitoes?
They're eaten by a different creature.
All those amphibians, bats, they're the base of the food chain. Extraordinarily important to support diverse ecosystem. So in fact, you don't get mosquito problems with a healthy ecosystem. Around the studies of that have been done around here. So how would you, where do mosquitoes breed? Yeah, the biggest in Brazil and in Singapore and in where dengue fever, mosquito-borne. Anybody had malaria or dengue? Is there dengue where you come from? Dengue fever?
I'm not sure.
There is where I come from. I mean, it's not. I've had malaria. I tell you, it's not fun. The biggest issue, they got the biggest public health drop, a 90% drop in dengue cases when they got rid of the old rubber tires. It had water gathered in them. Mosquitoes, there's no little tadpoles eating the mosquito larvae, there's nothing else in them. And old tires turned out to be the biggest source of mosquitoes. So how we design our ecosystems, our urban ecosystem, really depends on how we design our diseases. You know, I gave you the example of avian flu, swine flu, Zika virus now. So what do? We come along, public health department sprays a lot of chemicals to kill mosquitoes. that goes through, poisons, all sorts of other organisms as well. Or do we design, in Christie's garden, is there standing water?
Yeah.
You get attacked by mosquitoes? It's a healthy urban ecosystem with a little standing pond. Why are there no ponds why is there very little surface water in an urban environment? If we wanted to we talked about putting wetlands in LaGuardia Place. Why isn't the design in there? What are they going to say on Thursday when we go and see them about putting in water features?
It attracts too much wildlife.
Interesting, it does attract wildlife because surface water is so limited. But you know, where do the pigeons drink? Where do you see pigeons drinking? In the gutters, right? Wherever there's a little bit of water gathered. They'd probably be healthier if they drank in a healthy urban ecosystem. It's all sorts of paternalistic things about people who drown in it. Safety is the main reason why bodies of water are excluded from. They don't have to be fenced, etc. Anyway, so there's a safety issue. But how is safety being redefined recently with the Volkswagen Dieselgate? Are we scared of putting a pond in Christie's because the child almost died in the refrigerator? Is that child going to die by falling into the pond? Is it safety as in health, right? The safety issues are now redefined as health issues. A body of water, if it's not a chlorinated, stupid fountain like they have in most urban contexts. In an urban context, it's that they have to put more and more chlorine and chemicals into, and the maintenance burden is difficult. Naturalizing water, urban water, does a great deal to. Actually, it's funny. They're in the water feature in the Sidewash at LaGuardia Place in Washington Square Village. There's a beautiful rectangular modernist garden, right? And there's a rectangular water feature. And it puzzled me. It's a nice, clean-edged, chlorinated. There's a picture of it. They celebrate it for the local as a natural space. It has little fountains. You know why they have to have fountains in bodies of water? Because otherwise they go green and eutrophy, right? They have to oxygenate them because there's no plants in there, no water plants in there to oxygenate them. So they have to circulate the water and burn coal in order to pump water up and down in order to oxygenate the water because they don't use natural processes, right? So, but the funny thing, they had all these ropes across it. I couldn't quite work out what the ropes were for. Any guesses?
To stop people from going in.
No, they were just. I thought that for me, because I like to do slack rope walking. I thought they were for walking.
Slackline.
Yes, but they weren't. And because the birds get in there, there's no shallow areas, so the birds fall in. Then they can't get out. They flap around until they're exhausted and they drown. So they had all these drowned birds. But if they have the rope there, then they can get onto the rope and fall out. they're designed as if there isn't non-humans, as you know, they're designed as if there's some Photoshop image without active ecosystems, right? They're designed for them. The modernist view is designed as a simplified image, a photograph, a static, dead photograph. But we are designing and rethinking ecosystems with contemporary view that it matters how we design our ecosystems. That's going to determine whether or not, bless you, whether or not you get Zika virus. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this to get your, the X airport was an experiment to look at how do we use a wetland. Oh yeah, so we have the existing infrastructure of wetlands that we can use for a water-based landing system. But what we need to do is, you know, what if there's not one, right, near? Can we take over a parking lot and make it into a wet landing? It's only 500 to 700 feet with a 2-inch draw. Perfect for a wetland, right? Not a big chlorinated pool like this, but a healthy, biodiverse ecosystem. And how do we incentivize that? How do we make it useful for diverse communities? Where we take it as not just an image of an empty space, a leisure space, but a place where we can work and hang out and have it. We make it into a wet landing. So a workspace. So this is the bird study, the heads down display. Why not finish your dissertation or your thesis while you're watching the dragonflies? Why not work? Again, have you read did I make you read the articles about sitting is the new smoking? Can you look up sitting is the new smoking? Actually, you know what was just happened we were just Good Friday, right? Does anybody know, is anybody practicing Christian? Does anybody know the story of Good Friday and Easter? This is the time Jesus was put on a cross, crucified. He died in about 4 hours and then was buried and then he rose again. That's what we just celebrated. Question is, why did he die? I always thought about that.
Suffocation, wasn't it?
So he just had a few holes in his hands and holes in his feet. Is that deadly? I didn't know that. So what's the
position you want? Like you get tired, so you need to rest. And once you do that, you can. I don't know why you can be. Right?
Well, it's essentially complete organ failure because suffocation and lack of capacity to move. Because most of our lymphatic system is not pumped, right? That's all through movement. So when you lie in a hospital bed, they put little compression things on you because you gather fluid. It's actually really bad for you to lie in a hospital bed, right? You get muscle deterioration. So they have to do all this stuff to keep your body active. So it was the fact that he was still that made it difficult to breathe and made his circulatory system fail. And what do we do when we work? And we move how much of our body? How many of you get sore shoulders and neck and back?
And also the problem is the laptop. We need the laptop because if not, we're like this. We need to have the position of the screen more or less.
They have treadmills that do that.
Eh?
They have treadmills that do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're on treadmills?
No.
It's that thing that moves when you're walking. When you're exercising, you can run.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have like those treadmill desks.
Yeah. Just done an article about the
So
QB.
video games.
There's a anyway, yes, there's a some efforts, but this is not actually the idea. right? There's not some ideal position.
Is to be like removed.
Okay, not there. Okay, now we make it there. No, it's actually, walking, getting up, making tea. You know why you make all those cups of tea is because you need to move around, right? It's just you need to take different positions. Your body needs to move, right? Sitting is the new smoking. It's actually the lack of circulation that is really a health problem, right? That it starts now. You're feeling it now.
Should we stand then?
Yeah, they can get comfortable.
Okay. But so I both this is creative agency, but for your own sense of physical well-being. This is an example of, do we redesign our relationship to natural systems? Is redesigning our relationship to our body as well, right? We are part of a natural system. So this was the heads down display as we built it. This was the bird study. So you could set, this turns out to be a really nice way to work, because it's not sitting, and it's not standing. It's a relaxed angle. There's an angle of about, it's actually a little bit shallower than you think it is, where it's really lovely for reading and writing and thinking through. So I found tremendous. But this heads down display and the heads way down display. Anybody does yoga? How relaxing is the downward dog? It's about, it's delightful too. So this is a little foam cushion that is again. So this project, X Airport, was all about reimagining the wet landing. How often do you have to level a wet landing? If you were building a dry landing versus a wet landing, you have to grade it, you have to make sure the drainage, you have to mow it if it's only an occasional use one. They're quite expensive to maintain, about $100,000 to build a small landing area for light aircraft. They do it in rural communities, but they still need to be maintained. A wet landing, never have to level it. Completely self-maintaining, right? So it's part of an infrastructure. If we all bought planes, we all turned those parking lots into wet landings that were healthy, biodiverse places you could land and go and finish your thesis and watch the dragonflies. This is another strategy to explore the wonder of flight. So this is what I call a strap-on flight simulator. So it allows you to use your car as a portable wind tunnel. So different shaped wings, biomimetic wings. You change the angle of attack. You learn how to fly, right? It's like trainer wheels for flying your own plane, right? So fun. We actually have a little iPhone app that you can strap onto your thing as well. It takes the acceleration changes, so you can log your flights. But the wonder of flight, who puts their hand out the window?
All the time.
Yes. Why?
It's fun.
It's just delightful, right? It's just delightful. So I was actually, you'll see here, I was actually getting flying lessons from my friend who's a pigeon. Where is it? So this gives you an understanding of interesting. Did anybody else get some time lapse?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's pull that out while I'm. Okay, let me finish this, and then you'll see that we can test different wing types, figure out why do seabirds have pointed wings? All seabirds, albatrosses and seagulls, why do they all have these long, thin, pointed wings? And why do turkeys and eagles and have these shovel-shaped wings?
Wind, maybe.
Wind? Well, think of the different ecosystems. Think of how they fly differently.
Lifestyle.
Sorry?
Lifestyle.
Their lifestyle, yeah. Where do seabirds land? They land on big, open beaches or water, right? They don't have to maneuver. A turkey, what does it have to do? What's the lifestyle of a turkey?
Gobble.
Gobble, gobble, and they have to get through.
They fly a lot.
No.
Well, they fly, but they have to maneuver through a woodland, right? Yeah, so they require maneuverability. And so the efficient, really thin, long wing of the seabird, this is, now you're all aeronautical engineers, okay? This is the essential thesis of 5 years of aeronautical engineering. That's why you have efficient wing efficiency, long and thin, pointed ends, so the vortex is shed, versus the shovel wings. We have maneuverability, right? Okay, and so then you can strap on your 16-foot wingspan wings, right? And then you can start flying across your wetlands and practicing your wet landings in the other context. So that becomes a nice facility for doing, going zip lining and wet landing. And again, now you feel the wings with your whole body, the lift that you get. And then you can start, this is much better zip lining this way than doing it like a sack of potatoes, right? And zip lining. So I did this in Toronto. If you saw, we set up, we flew hundreds of people through downtown Toronto, past over Nathanville Square, past City Hall, to explore what, cheap, radically inexpensive urban mobility might look like. It was emissionless, it was joyous, it's fun. So you climbed up, after you went through flight school, climbed up and you jumped onto your wings and you flew across. Many different. Okay, so I'll just keep this playing. So why do you think we did this? As a form of inviting participatory social change. Would any of you like to do this?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we set zip lines around NYU? Safer than walking. Rain or shine. In fact, the kids they wouldn't give me the insurance to do this. This was the one night Nuit Blanche event, and the kids could not fly. The city wouldn't issue it. So the kids started this whole, they wrote their whole curriculum. We'll design our own wings. We'll, build our own wings and we'll zip line to school. And then we won't have these yellow buses and their diesel emissions, and we won't have the safety issues of riding to school and wearing helmets and, not having enough bike lanes, and we'll just, zip line to school. So it's a whole thesis of a different kind of form of control, right? There's a control tower in there, and the laser lights were actually responsive to people's voices. So as people were flying across, and people, whoa, they yelled at each other, the laser lights went up. So the control tower was actually controlled by the participation of people. So this idea, this was your graduation ceremony after you'd walked through and signed all your releases and got, and there was lots of great music. Yeah. Yeah. Really.
Where was this again?
In Toronto. So the idea that what I call this is a shared memory of a possible future. Why would I call it that? As a strategy, I'm interested in redesigning and rethinking and reimagining our urban environments so that they are much more delightful and healthy, right? So why would I do this? I mean, is it just a ride? A cheap theme park ride? Actually, the flight test that you had to do, I was going to give it to you guys. You had your you had to sign off on a little written test, a little multi-choice written test, like when you got a what's in here? Yeah. So you went through the instructions of how to do this. It was very much like and this was your autopilot license. So you got an autopilot license tattooed onto you after you'd signed your releases, and then of course you signed it yourself. You authorized yourself to fly. And this is an idea that if you've experienced this, if you had flown this, if you'd seen, oh, this is safe. Okay, I can see this is going to fail or not. I'm going to do this. I can see how this works. These were actually electric motors. The San Jose version was just a gravity one over the wetlands, but this was electric motors. On-axis electric motors could zip line very sort of the opposite of elevators, right? They could transform urban mobility. If we can fly people around that way, do we have to have diesel trucks coming in with polluting, or could we have emissionless, inexpensive ways to fly down a new line of H&M clothes and come flying down in a great parade showing, displaying. Could it be a kind of part of the public spectacle to distribute clothes instead of having diesel trucks that make no sense, right? So the idea of doing something like this, and it's a strategy that I want you to think about. It's a small demonstration that gives people a concrete experience, right? And that concrete experience means that ziplining through the downtown no longer seems ridiculous, right? Say it to most people, oh, that's ridiculous, right? It's immediately dismissed before it's even considered. Before you can even make the arguments on the basis of energy, safety, delight, creating a healthy urban ecosystem, any of those things, because it's not familiar. But by making it familiar, by putting in a convivial learning context, by being able to discuss it with your friends, by understanding that in fact grandmothers were the most enthusiastic flyers. They were the ones that lined up 4 and 5 times. They kept coming back.
How long was the line?
And there was 8 different lines. One of them was 80 foot tall. And you had to climb up there. And they were delighted by it. Totally delighted. I think grandmothers wouldn't have flown so much if children could have flown. So no one under 18 could fly. Because I think what happens in a lot of my projects, at least, is because they seem fun, parents and grandparents think, oh, that's for children. Did you sign a contract that at 18 you would stop having fun? This, I think, demonstrates that it's delightful at any age, right? That actually play spaces like the ones that it's not just for children. We all need convivial, playful, imaginative spaces that are delightful. Okay, these are the wing swings. We can set one of these up anywhere. I mean, these actually, there's a whole lot of the wings sitting in. We can't use the clinic at the moment because it's stuffed with wings. If you can think of this idea, can we set up a wing swing and make it a little experience of in LaGuardia Place, right in the middle of the street? Flying over the trucks. I don't know. So concrete, small-scale experiences that enable the discussion of possible futures, right? Because frankly, the crisis that we are designing in and around is a crisis of agency, a crisis of creative agency, that none of us think the capacity to get some interesting design implemented is so very, very hard. Ellie, I wanted you to mention, I sent around the link that you had sent about in Paris. So when you saw that, did you, what did you think of it?
I thought that the shape was interesting because it reminded me of the one that I was thinking about. Yeah, the little bubble. Did you guys all look at it? I can pull it up.
Yeah, pull it up.
Somewhere. The idea of house plants, because that's what's in this, is a little bit strange to me because you can just put those in your house. I don't really see the need. But if you did something like, I don't know, I was thinking about tea. I don't know why, because I thought that'd be cool. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss it. I mean, what's striking to me is that it's Photoshop.
Is it? Yes, it is. Clearly, very clearly.
The article says
They're in Paris, yeah.
Yeah, and there's no photos of them.
Because they were only there for a short time, or
I don't know.
maybe it's not real. I just thought
This is the question, right? This is the apparently it's just as easy to put a Photoshop version of it in. I find that really difficult, right?
What?
Photoshop urbanism.
I just thought the shape was interesting because it maximizes the surface area around the orb. I don't know. What am I supposed to be talking about?
Well, how did it get in there? Is it in there? I mean, this very question, is it actually there? We don't know.
The giant bubbles were installed from November 26th through the 28th in Garmont. Thank you. Blah, blah, blah. Those entering the exhibition, formerly called My Bubble, My Plant and Me, enjoyed the beauty and fresh air of the surrounding foliage. The organizers, inspired by Andy Warhol saying that everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame, wanted all who visited the bubbles to have their 15 minutes of green.
Right, so is that an interesting idea?
I think
Let's critique it. Let's critique it. Who put it in? Who put it in? Why did they put it in? Was it actually really there? Why is it being recorded like this? What's going on here, right? And why can't we do that, right? I can tell you, I've designed an urban space station. Frankly, it's a much better design. It's engineered. It's very real. It has real urban contribution. It's a mutualistic system. It actually does replenishing. I haven't gotten it in yet, right? 7 years, 8 years of arguing with NYU, not able to do it, right? How did they get it in? An exhibition that's actually sponsored by a flower show that may or may not actually have been there, because why wouldn't they have it image
Yeah,
there.
and
And then
social media would be, I think, we can done with social media.
what is going on here? And why is it not sufficient to be able to, why is it about a celebration of houseplants and the stupid thing of a survey of 16% of people have houseplants in their workspace, right? Why isn't it about actually how do we really rethink our relationship to natural systems? And do we want to put little bubbles in an urban space and privatize public space and make these little 15-minute slots of fame? I mean, Andy Warhol is not an interesting philosopher.
I would just like to be clear that this is not my idea.
No. I'm just saying, what we're doing is critique and discussing a project, right? And
yeah, there's no real photos of it online anywhere, so I don't know what's going on.
How many days was it up for?
2.
That's
I
fine.
think people would like Instagram
Yeah,
and stuff.
that's also like a few
for
days
me,
for, like,
if I can only see a Photoshop of it, I get very, very suspicious. It means to me that, what we're seeing, we are dealing with exactly the same thing with Washington Square, with the LaGuardia Place. If you look here, they have a Photoshop photo of what it's going to look like with a stupid person.
Really happy.
Yeah, always 32 years old, always kind of actively in an executive, not actual scruffy students, not actual people, no homeless people, no actual non-humans, these horrible Photoshops that lie. Have got no accountability to, okay, let's see if you can do this Photoshop. Photoshop montages are the lie that they are.
Okay, my idea would have a water collection system, and we could make biogas from the tea plant waste. And what else did I do? There's just the dome. I was trying to figure out the cost, how much it would cost to do this little dome. I don't know. I have no idea. And then I wrote this whole paragraph out after you emailed me.
Okay, great.
I can read it if you want.
Well, I suppose I just want to say, you've got to deal with answer this question that I have to answer and struggle with the tree office. Are you privatizing public space? And if you are, is it a vending license that you want? Is it a private commercial space? What sort of space is it? How do you justify the space? Is it something that's sponsored by the Dutch Flower Show? Is it something that, is basically a commercial,
Can I pitch an idea?
Sure.
So mine is next to a school on 11th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenues, I believe. And I was thinking that maybe if you put in a little greenhouse there, or you put in even like a little raised up wildlife center where birds could go up and feed and everything, it could be a part of the school. And maybe they could make a class where they come and learn about. I don't know if they would do that. I don't know if that's even possible, but I was thinking that might be a good idea.
So I've tried that on the school on 11th Street. And I had 4 funded graduate students to develop curricula for the school to take on a green roof. It's just, an interesting case study of how these are things that actually do and don't happen. Makes perfect sense, right? Who funds it, right? Schools have no budgets. I'm doing the Feral Robots project at the moment with, the National Science Foundation for me to fund me to do a robotics research project would be, $150,000 to support students and lab and stuff. I think it makes sense to do robotics that sniff out urban contaminants in school grounds. The budget you get for that, $500. Can that pay for any student assistance? Can any lab procedures? Can any equipment? Doesn't even cover the travel to and from there, right? So very hard to build who builds these ETFE greenhouse structures? Frankfurt Football Stadium is the one, or this in. So first of all, this issue of actually, okay, so maybe we can do an IOB campaign. Maybe we can get a local neighborhood to do it. Then what happened in the 11th Street School, PS 42, is a strange phenomena that, you know, schools actually have, they're accountable to these high stakes tests, particularly middle schools and primary schools, and of course high schools, but this was a middle school, primary school, grade school, whatever they call them, grade school, right? So how easy do you think it is to get curricula into changing the curricula, teaching students about urban ecosystems and what makes a healthy urban ecosystem, identifying plants? How easy is that to, even as an NYU professor in the School of Education with graduate students doing teaching certifications, the principal at PS 42 was accountable to politicians and the performance and the tests of the students. Sorry. So the jeweler who did a lot of fundraising, some corporate fundraising, and built a little garden that had, you know, it was a decorative garden that has no pedagogical value, no engineering fundamentals applied, no, you know, conventional. So it actually, they did get a little bit of a green roof done, but it had, getting it as a pedagogical resource is tremendously difficult. Not to say, I mean, it's to encourage it, because it should be, right? It makes sense. Shouldn't we be educating our young with the most important ideas for the 21st century, right? Redesigning our relationship to natural systems, understanding how natural systems work, understanding that an urban system is a natural system, understanding that we can design urban infrastructure so it improves human and environmental health. Fundamental ideas would be great to have a delightful new classroom that they could hang out in. So maybe there's models. There's a so it's a hard institution to work with, public schools, right? But not impossible. But you know, how you would do that requires some thinking through.
I mean, you could like target private schools first because they have more flexible curriculums.
Exactly.
Public schools have like so far curriculums for public school.
Exactly. So the first greenhouse was built on a New York City school, private school on the Upper East Side. Sorry? Yeah, so once you've piloted it and demonstrated. But here's what we've learned from building greenhouses in schools. They don't work. They don't even work at universities. You know, there's a greenhouse at NYU. Did you know that? Wouldn't that make a great office? Great place to work? Great, particularly seasons. In greenhouses, their growing season is when? When's the growing season? So basically you start planting nowish. And what happens to the greenhouses over summer? When they're the most productive, when things are most happening, when you're having all the growth responses, when you have to do everything.
It's the worst moment.
There's nobody there, right? So the issue with greenhouses in schools as an institutional one is that they don't, by the time things start blooming, they're doing their high stakes testing and then they leave. And then over summer, when it's most active, there's no students there, and there's some, you know, cabbages and things you can grow in October when they come back. But so they don't work well in the current institutional structure. So it's an interesting institutional design change too. Maybe it's about a summer school facility.
In
right?
the community housing, for example, could work, no?
Yeah.
Instead of because there are children, there is children. and there's no like, it's not like a high school. There's no like, I mean, do you know what I mean? There's no holidays in a
Yeah. So in community, in lived environments, and maybe this is true in preschool environments where you have year-round childcare. So maybe it's about finding that, and maybe it's about positing a new school. There's a couple of new schools around, new charter schools that are designed for and around this, right? Maybe this is the basis of. There's farm schools. There's the island school. There's these are. You know, how do you really make it work? Or, you know, I think it's make it work as a pop-up. You know, that I think that the thing of waiting for funding or getting somebody else to pay for it or finding a public agency who's going to, that just makes it a very difficult sell, right? Anyway, read us what you have, and can you show us your thing, and then we'll take a quick break.
Okay.
Read us your proposal.
The whole motivation behind this fun little greenhouse is that it would be hopefully, hypothetically, be able to sustain itself using minimal energy, perhaps generating its own somehow. Parentheses, solar, biochar, mini wind turbines, or at least not using as much as the controlled environment agriculture as you were talking about too. I haven't done much studies into this field, so I don't know if the trade-off is worth it, the cost. I hope it is worth it because I imagine the greenhouse having a completely different atmosphere than the outside air. I think it would be a great way to attract people of all ages. It would be like stepping into another world, one that's warm, dreamy, educational, about ancient Chinese or Indian traditions, if it's like different teas, and also useful. Tea is and has long been a hot commodity. How great would it be to grow it locally rather than use diesel trucks, Jeremijinko, to ship it in from thousands of miles away? I was hoping that the tea garden could be run by a school so that urban children can learn about agriculture and get in touch with the modern changes. It could be a class, growing tea in their city. And then they could sell the tea, like kids make their own lemonade stands. The green space I have in mind is next to a school, so it would be perfect, although there's already a community garden there, so I wouldn't want to disrupt it unless everyone was on board. But I think it would be great if it weren't a hindrance. I know this is kind of a romantic notion, perhaps naive to presume it possible. It also sounds like child labor. I could run it myself, I suppose, checking the temperature, watering everything, etc. Many people these days have been creating their own ecosystems inside a terrarium, made of soil and plants in a transparent container. Some people go so far as to install an artificial rainwater system using pipes and humidifiers. Maybe I could do something like that.
So that all sounds great, doesn't it? Have you looked into if you were to fund? Okay, let's talk about, this is for your green space. How would you adapt it for your green space? Your particular green space. You don't think it would work in your particular little triangle?
It's not a little triangle. Here, I'll show you what I.
Sorry, I'm getting mixed up.
He has triangles.
Yeah, why not do one of these on a particular triangle?
I was imagining something actually very large, but I know that that's not possible at the beginning. It's this one. So if I go up, I'll show you Earth. It's this space right here. You see?
Yeah.
And then there's this right there.
Lower East Side.
It's next to a mosque.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So maybe they could.
That would be interesting to see Islamic traditions and.
They've been a part of the tea trade. I was also looking up the climate for tea.
Yeah.
Where it's best. I was looking at parts of India where it's the most popular.
And Japan and.
Yeah. But if it's next to a mosque, then India is relevant. China as well, obviously, and Japan, obviously.
Yeah. Tea, there's a whole lot of there's a list on Wikipedia of, it's not a very good list, but it's a beginning of a list of butterflies that depend on T class. Have a look at this particular pavilion. This was the first pavilion designed that is essentially an intensified forest. The Austrian pavilion was about
At the expo?
at the Milan World Expo, yeah, where they did some bad calculations on the, again, unreferenced,
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
but good to compare to. So not very good science. Unfortunately, the design world is not related to design, but it's worth looking at. I would posit that what we would like to do in the shared public experiment of the LaGuardia Place is an experiment much like Ellie said, you know, could I support this? That's the kind of, that's the experiment. To build it would it actually be to explore, could it self-sustain, and what does that mean, right? So the question that I would say for the public experiment of LaGuardia Place and Bleecker Street is, how do we design the most productive little ecosystem in the world? The most productive urban ecosystem in New York City. How do we design that? And I think that's actually a worthy question. That's kind of, how would we in an urban environment, we could say maximize the leaf area index, and that's one metric, but I think that's not it. The most productive little street, the healthiest urban ecosystem, the most intensified. How would we design that? Could we take this one space and say, this is a question worth asking and figuring out? And we don't know the answers to it. And there isn't, you know, it's not been done before. But as a collective question, we think that's the most important thing, right? To make the most productive, because then we'll have the most human health benefits. We'll have the biggest green space. How do we make it the most productive? Manhattan, you know? How do we make it the Manhattan of urban ecosystems? Right? The New York City. Isn't Greenwich Village the place where great ideas of urbanity have been developed? What is culturally productive? Greenwich Village has been the icon of social movements and Jane Jacobs. That's a kind of a shared question I think we would have. Let's see your time lapse before we have a little break. Do you want to tell us all about it?
I was just at the reward.
Oh, it's exactly what I was saying to you about yours. What we see is not only the activity of the background, but we actually tune into the little movements of the delicate little dance of the what are they? Little grasses? It's like,
I don't know. They're like vines.
oh, this is in LaGuardia Place?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, it's an ivy. Yeah, sorry, I was looking.
Can you move over a little bit?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, hold this out. I want to pull up another one. What if you put music behind that? What would you put behind it?
Yeah, I have no idea. Something nice. Waltzing.
Would you? I'd put something really beat driven. I don't know if this is the one. This is not the one. Hops is a anybody know what hops are? Has anybody brewed their own beer?
I know there.
Here's a time lapse of hops growing. Hops can grow. It's one of the things that New York area hops used to be extraordinarily famous for. The beer from this area. In one season, they can grow 15 feet, right, of foliage. It takes about 7 years for a street tree to grow that kind of foliage. Hops grow around here very well. Kind of beer festivals and hops growing festivals that you could have are kind of extraordinary. But the time lapses that I'm not able to find are the little because they're climbing vines. When you watch the nodules of the adventitious tissue of the hops, they're making these little micro decisions, left, right, and they look like they're exploring around. They really, it looks so animate, right? That they figuring out where to grow. It's light here, it's there, it's there. It's just such a beautiful dance. The spectacularization of hops. Okay, let's take a break. Any other time that was it. Before we go, what I want to come back and discuss is meeting on Thursday. I'm about to write a note saying that we'd all like to come and meet in person if possible. And I'd like to spend the last part of the class, again, I don't think we're going to watch this little movie, so I might give it to you, although I rented it. Talking about Unity. Anybody a gamer? You're a gamer? Have you built anything in Unity game engine?
No.
No? Okay.
I know people who like.
Oh, good. Gamer? Sorry? Oh, really? Cool. Gamer? Gamer? What is it about games? Why is it that more people spend more time on games than on? It's a big idea that I've had that Fernando's knows that we've been trying to think about.
It's a different reality, so it's kind of easy to get lost in it. It's not stuff that you need to yourself.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
You choose whoever you want to be.
It's imaginative, right? It's imaginative play. It's an imaginative world. It's a possible world, right? Is there any relationship between, this world of serious games? Is that what your sister's involved in? Is she involved in serious games? So does she do, what sort of game design does she do?
She's in game design, so she does it. I mean, she's involved in the whole part, but she's studying.
She's studying here.
In
Where?
Florida.
Florida. Interesting. I mean, it's a huge growing industry. I set up a couple of game design degrees in my past. And why? Why is it an interesting industry? Why don't we just say it's the opioid of the masses. Right? How many hours are spent on any of the big ones? But what's the little Minecraft? How many hours are spent on Minecraft, building things on Minecraft? Anyone played Minecraft?
Yeah.
Economic hours of human labor on Minecraft. I mean, that would actually be an interesting indicator versus study time. What are you doing there?
Go.
One of the things that annoys me about games is it's rule bound, right? There's some rules that you're saying, okay, within these rules, we're going to do this. It's very different from RL, real life, right? Where figuring out the rules is really hard. Who can build something here? Why wouldn't you just be able to make a beautiful greenhouse for a school and have it funded because we want wonderful things for our children, right? You know, figuring out how and why the logic of that doesn't seem so as apparent as it should be, right? And how you would actually make that happen, how you'd actually get funding, how you'd actually figure out how to get something done. I've resented games because they kind of delegate the capacity to make the rules, right? But in something like the Unity game engine, there are two things going on. So Unity is a game engine for 3D space, and when we come back, we'll do a couple of tutorials and think about how to use it. So you've used it. You're somewhat familiar with it. Okay, so you can give a little tutorial to everybody else.
I know people who use it, but I've only observed and I haven't learned.
All right, do you know this idea of memory castle? Anyone know what a memory castle is? Anyone done memory techniques, how to have a really good memory?
I saw that.
New York Times article.
In the show, Sherlock, he has like a mind palace.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Mind palace.
So, and New York Times just did a memory palace.
You two room and each room just like some memories. Yeah.
So you can like find a way to
Yeah.
memories in your.
The ancient and proven way to improve memorization. Go ahead and try it. This is an article from March 24th in New York Times. In January, I devoted every walk from my home to the train to contemplating work details, hoping to improve my recall of them. That was my New Year's resolution. So far, I've stuck to it. In every one of these works, I've also retraced a memorization technique known to the ancients and shown by modern science to be highly effective. The Rhetorica ad perennium, written in 80s BC by an unknown author, is the first known text on the art of memorization. It's also the oldest surviving Latin book on rhetoric. It teaches the method of loci, known as the memory palace. As the name suggests, the approach involves associating the ideas or objects to be memorized with the memorable scenes imagined at well-known locations, loci, like one's house or palace, in case your house was a palace, or along a familiar walking route. You can test the method for yourself. If you're like most people, you would not easily commit to long-term memory of 10-item shopping list, but I bet you could remember it and for more than a few minutes if you first visualized it along a walk through your house. The entryway of your house is festooned with toilet paper, your kitchen sink is full of lobster, dancing in the bathtub size is butter melts on your dining room table, etc. So this memory palace idea, right, of localizing memories. Are we talking about memories? Remember the shared public memories of possible futures idea with the Nathan Phillips Square? Forevermore, it's a memory, but it's also a possibility. What's the difference between a memory and a possibility? Yeah, but it's also has to be reanimated in order to be retrieved, right? Yeah, and then maybe they're not that different. Maybe the reason why we're interested in history is because if something was done in the past, there's been a greenhouse done in the past somewhere, that makes it more possible in the future, right? Possibilities and memories, I think, have a interesting relationship. And it's the new idea I have to explore with you guys, that what if we made a collective memory palace of both historical memories and future possibilities instead of a dumb Photoshop? What if we could put a Unity 3D game engine of LaGuardia Place and Bleecker Street? We could put possibilities there and memories there, right? As a gaming space. Taking the gaming space, that's kind of a closed world idea, and saying, can this help us explore a future world? Is that potentially a place for us to do better than what NYU has done with a dumb little, you saw that, to make concrete, make believable, make available many delightful little ideas? And could we make a collective memory space? So that's the big experiment that I'm interested in. I don't think a Unity game engine or a 3D gaming space has been used for, but it works that way, right? There's some sense of where things are and what happened over there, as if it were real. It doesn't really matter that it wasn't real space. It doesn't really matter whether or not that bubble was built in Paris. You know, this idea of making these possibilities more real, more tangible, more available, and more possible, right? Making possible possibilities. That's the thing that we have with these turgid bureaucratic processes. How do we make something cool, delightful, wonderful, healthy, good happen in our local environments? It's a big and hard question. Let's take a break and we'll come back and talk about the Unity game engine. Okay.